ESSER and then also Prop 28 as to where things are going right now. And as we have our discussions today with the panelists, it's important to remember that with this federal funding that's coming through, the state education associations are the entities that are managing the funding that's coming down, and that's being sent into what's called LEAs, or as we know it, the school districts within the states across the country. And the two pieces to note, one is, I can't stress this enough, and it's hard to believe that this was 9 years ago now, just about, but in 2015, President Obama signed into law ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act. And this was huge for music education, as it made music and arts part of a well-rounded education. I know some of you that I see here with me today have lobbied on behalf of NAM and have been part of the fly-ins and so forth through the years, and those efforts came to a big fruition at that time. But I'm still pretty amazed across the country when I talk to music educators and tell them that, hey, did you know music and arts is part of a well-rounded education? No, I didn't. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. It's still something that we all have to continue to advocate with our educators in our areas across the country, so they understand that this funding, music and arts, is a part of it because of what was signed into law back in 2015. So the two pieces we're going to hit on today, one is Prop 28, and I know this is probably more specific for those of you that service California, but it's important nonetheless because it's an unprecedented amount of funding going into the state of California. We're going to talk to Ann Fennell a little bit about that in a bit. And it's one that is a very simple process in the state. All schools are eligible, and there's a piece of it that's for people, and there's a piece of it that's for resources. So we're going to hit on that in a few minutes with Dr. Bollino and also Scott Burgener, who's with us today. We're going to get into ESSER because we're to the finish line. And I think as an industry, we probably have a little ESSER fatigue because we've been hearing about it so much for the last 4 years. However, I will tell you, there are millions and millions and millions of dollars still out there that districts are looking to spend. Things are being reallocated, and I know Dr. Bollino and Scott can help us unpack that a little bit here. And what you'll see is that third tranche of money that came in 2021, there is an expiration date that's on that for this year, and we're going to walk through what's happening with that and what we can do to access that. And just as a reminder, what happened with ESSER 3 is it's basically 8 times the level of funding that schools normally saw for Title I. So just a large amount of funding. And if it's not used this year, it's going to go back to the state departments of education and potentially back to the federal government. The first step we're going to take here is we're going to get into Prop 28 in California. With Ann Fennell from San Diego Unified. She couldn't be with us here live today, so I have a quick pre-recorded video that we're going to watch together, and we can answer questions in real time as we watch this together. All right, and Julia, just give me a thumbs up if everything's working okay. Hello, everyone. This is Mike Kamphuis, Vice President of Sales and Marketing at conn-selmer in Elkhart, Indiana. Pleased to be with you today to discuss some policy things happening in music education. To help you with this today, I have a special guest with me, Ann Fennell. Thanks for being with me today, Ann.
Thanks, Mike.
Ann is from San Diego Unified School District in California and has been involved in arts education for almost 37 years now. She's currently the immediate past president of California Music Educators Association, as well as Western Division president for NAFME, or I should say president-elect for NAFME. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being here today with me. With policy, we went through a lot with ESSER funding the last 3 years, but in your neck of the woods, there's been this Proposition 28, which is very significant in regards to arts funding in the state of California. And I'm getting a lot of questions from both dealers and educators across the country about what is happening with Prop 28, specific to California. It's very unique. It's a very significant investment in the arts. What can you tell us about the latest updates on those funding allocations happening in California for our friends out there?
Thanks, Mike. We're very lucky. Prop 28 passed with like 64.4% of the voters passing this, and it passed in November 2022. And now it's guaranteed funding for the arts. It is state law. So it is the beautiful part about this. It is going to increase arts education across the state. And that is the goal, to increase arts education. So new hires, actually have budgets for materials and supplies. It's a wonderful thing. We know that this year we have $938 million coming to the state for arts education, preschool through grade 12. And it fell into everyone's account in February, and then we'll have monthly apportionments for this fiscal year. And it is in perpetuity. That means every year they're going to figure out exactly how much money is coming in, and it's going to land. So it's going to land, and then we get to use it in different ways. 80% of the funds can be for classified or certificated personnel. 19% of the funds can be for supplies, professional learning, instruments, things that we need to do our job, and 1% is saved for administration. I'm going to back up on that 80%. It says at least 80% can be used for personnel. That's important because we now know that it might cost more than 80%. You might have a fewer less dollars for what you might want to spend on supplies and whatnot. And again, it's guaranteed funding, and it's just fantastic. We know that to reverse a law, you'd have to have 2/3 vote to reverse a law. So it's not going to happen. And we just feel very lucky we have it in the state of California. It's going to change arts education for sure.
You know, as there is with federal funding, there's usually a little bit of confusion as to how does that trickle down and how does that affect my LEA or, you know, the school district that I'm in. There's a little bit of confusion out there in California, at least from what we've been hearing, for the educators who may want to request more significant funding for their program.
It is truly based on every school's enrollment, and a school will get their appropriated amount. So it's per child, and then Title I students or students with free and reduced lunch, they get an extra bump. So the calculations are done, and that is what you will get. Now, if you want to use more or less of the percentages that are allotted, that might require a waiver. We do know that if you have a school district of 500 or more pupils, at least 80% of the money should be expended towards certificated or classified employees. But if you're under that, if you're 499, we are thinking that's where the waiver is going to come in, and where, or rather not the waiver, but rather the adjustments can come in. We don't know what the waiver is going to look like. There is nothing on the Department of Education's website right now at this point. So we don't know what that would entail. It is a set amount of money. It's what you want to do with that money within the percentages that you might be able to use a waiver for it, if that helps.
As far as where folks can get access to the funding, who are the stakeholders that they should be going to in order to say, hey, I have a need for my program. How do I access this Prop 28 funding? How should that process happen?
Well, number one, I would have them go into whoever they're going to speak with and share the amount that you know your school site's getting. So I think that also is a conversation with all of the arts teachers on that campus. We know we're getting this kind of money. Let's make a plan, discuss it with the principal. And then you get to move towards someone to know, hey, we'd like to hire this person, we would like to hire for this job, and we'd like to do the following supplies. So you have to speak within your school district and within your school to determine where those funds can be spent. Now, every school district is so different. So I know in a small school district, you could talk to your principal, you might have someone that's purchasing on your site, and they work through all the purchases at the district level. At a large school district, you might submit your order into the internet and then you'll get a reply back. So
Sure.
know who are the purchasing folks within your school district. Again, might be at the school district or it might be at the school site. Every school district's protocols for hiring are so different, and every school district's protocols for purchasing is very different. I would suggest a plan, and I would suggest have a wish list ready to go, because I think wish lists are important. And then when they say, do you have a spreadsheet ready? You go, yes, and here is the link right here.
And what we went through with ESSER funding, you know, similarly, you know, just make sure that when the opportunity does come, you have everything together that
Yes.
of what your needs are.
And I want to add in there, some school districts might require a second quote. So, and might require specificity with the item that you're purchasing.
Okay.
I've personally been in the position where you order something and then you get something that you did not order back because the purchase the person in purchasing just thought it was an equal purchase. They didn't know the difference.
Now, as far as I know, in ESSER, there were some publications put online so folks could reference districts and see how much funding is available and so forth. Are there places people can go to learn how much funding their district might have or are receiving?
There is a landing page with all frequently asked questions, and there's also, and you can go in there and check, and it'll tell you exactly principal apportionments. And there are a couple other websites that you can go specifically in by county, and we'll make sure we drop that into the chat. So you go in by county, then you find the school district, and it'll even dial it straight down to the school. So you know exactly what you're dealing with. Sometimes, I'm going to be honest with you, teachers don't always have the time to know all this information. So if there's a vendor out there that really wants to support their schools in their neighborhood or in that city, it would be nice if they can come in there and go, hey, we know you have this kind of money. What is visual art, theater, and dance, and media arts, and music? What is their plan? How much is that available for music? And what do you need? What can we help you with? And also, what's a long-term purchase? Because, by the way, these monies can roll over for up to 3 years. So maybe you want to bank a little bit of money because you want to make a bigger purchase down the line. You can do that. So really help them make a plan. And I think that that is something that's the most important thing we can tell anyone is have a plan. The money's going to be here forever. That's a great thing. And with opportunities to buy larger things down the road if the monies roll over. So maybe you're going to buy something small this year, but in 3 years, you know you have the opportunity to buy a large set of instruments. And that's a good thing to know. So you have a plan in hand with your other arts teachers as well.
Well, that's wonderful advice, Anne. And you've shared with us many links that we have put into the chat. And we're also going to leave on a resource page here in regards to Prop 28. So thank you so much for those great resources that you've provided us. Any last words of advice for music educators as they get into this and try to get their heads wrapped around it?
Yeah, I want to talk about the overall budget, just so you
Sure.
know there will be fluctuation. So Prop 28 is not funded out of the education budget. It's funded out of the general fund. So we're not taking anything out of Prop 98. We're getting an extra 1% for education, for arts education. But know that this can fluctuate. In California, our budget is based on tax receipts. And so if those are up, we get more money. If those are down, we get less money. Plus, if you have declining enrollment, you might get a little bit less money. If you have increasing enrollment, you might get more. The money that you receive annually is based on the year prior enrollment. So that prior year's enrollment will then be your money to spend the next year, the next fiscal year. So you pretty much know what's coming down and you can plan ahead. If you see you have declining enrollment continually, know that your money might be less over time. It's really important to know if you're hiring somebody so that there's always a buffer of what's possible, or know that maybe the district might come in and swoop in and take over a percentage of it. But just think the math is there and solid. You just have to plan in advance. One other thing I would suggest is really keep track of where the extra funds are. Keep a running sheet so that you know what is really being spent for this, because we just want to make sure that we are advocating for our children to receive the most possible with all this money that's a windfall for the state for the rest of our lives.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, Ann, I appreciate your time today to go through all this with me, and for our constituents that are out there. If anyone does have any questions on Prop 28 and would like some support, we're going to leave a little email address for you to drop any questions to, and we're happy to follow up and help support you in any way we possibly can. So, Ann, thank you so much for your time. This is great information, and thanks for all you do in support of music education.
Thank you. Very grateful. Thank you.
Dr. Annamarie Bollino, I'd like to bring you in to help me here. Dr. Bollino recently began working as the art supervisor for Prince William County Schools in Virginia after 20 years with Stafford County Public Schools as a music educator and fine arts coordinator. She's also the NAFME Southern Division President-elect and is here with me today to help us with ESSER. And Dr. Bollino, I'd love for you to give us some context as to what are the latest updates in regards to ESSER funding? What are you seeing in regards to the allocations, guidelines, and timeline that's taken us to the finish line this year? And thank you for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Mike. Yeah, it definitely is the 11th hour. It's really interesting because I remember being a part of some of the panels, and I see some friends on the call that I was on panels with, like Beth. And, that was really early, right? When we were all still at home. And now here we are, and it is really the 11th hour. And it's really interesting. I sense this sort of like franticness because divisions are starting to recognize what they've got left and they want to make sure they don't have to give the money back, right? So in terms of timelines, I think everybody knows that September 30th date is looming. So September 30th means that the money has to be committed or obligated to spend. And so what my division has told me, because we've gotten a significant amount of money, is that money has to be purchased and in our hands, but the invoicing part can happen later. I think that the terminology that the feds use is that it has to be liquidated by January 28th of 2025. So there's definitely a franticness to make sure that money gets spent. And I do think we're in a really great position because when we need big items spent quickly, we are an excellent place to do that, right? Between instruments or chairs or sound shells, risers, equipment, right? That leaves us in a really great space to be. And so there's a lot of different ways that Mike and I are going to talk about how you all can help those teachers to make sure they know how to navigate. And if they have been navigating, that's great. And I know many of you have partnered with folks like me or teachers or principals to get that money already. But now is like the time to push even more as we get to the finish line because I'm gonna tell you, like, I'm telling you from my experience, there's like a sense of desperation to spend the money. So even if you slip in, I think that it could reap huge benefits for our music programs.
So let's hit on the whole, how do we try to get to this money? Because obviously all the districts submitted their ESSER plans and there was a finite, here is our plan. And now they've reached a point where, there's money because they maybe didn't do these plans and so forth. What do you see as a process for music educators to go and get that funding right now? Because it's obviously a little different than what it may have been a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it definitely can be. I think so to start, it's still the same, right? You still have to figure out what you need. But also I think you have to if you don't quite know what is in that division's ESSER plan, then you might have to ask around, right? So the people that are those decision makers typically happen at the school division level, which is why it's hard. It's tricky for teachers because they're typically their boss is their principal, right? So sometimes they don't always know how to navigate or they don't know who's in charge of that funding. So for a division person like me, I know that I'm talking to our superintendent or the chief of staff or my department head or our procurement or finance office. So we have to teach teachers that those people, if they know anyone in those central office roles, that's a place to go. But I also don't want our teachers to get in trouble. So we also have to tell teachers to still continue to work the chain. But if they also have an elected official route, it's not always a bad idea to sometimes go around that way because elected officials are in places that teachers aren't, right? They're at tables and seats where ESSER money may be talked about. And a person, if they have some knowledge that there's needs and that they can spend that money quickly. So navigating those complex systems can be difficult. I say somebody like me, right? Because people like Scott, Ann, and I, we're already in the thick of it. But some teachers don't have people like us at the district level, so it can be tricky. So certainly teachers are also starting out with what their lists are. I think every good teacher has a wish list already, but now it's a matter of honing that wish list to make sure that it's allowable within what the LEA's plan is. Now, here's a catch. This actually happened to us. We're in the middle of spending ESSER money right now, and our ESSER person in procurement She just needed me to write a justification for an equipment piece that wasn't a musical instrument, right? So we wanted risers or sound shells or something. So all we're doing is writing a justification, and she's sending it on just in case DOE needs us to do some sort of addendum. So it is possible, and I think that's really important for us to communicate to teachers as you all vendors are working with teachers. And I think that, I think we know the typical things that can be purchased. Anne also mentioned this earlier in her presentation, and that is that I think it's important for teachers to understand district policies and thresholds for spending, especially in this time, because we're talking about what could be large chunks of money. And typically in most school divisions, right, you've got kind of up to a limit where you can use any vendor. Then you've got like a middle threshold limit, let's say between like 5 and 25,000, where you need 3 quotes, but they have to be of the same item, right? It has to be, I don't want to use an example to offend anybody, but it has to be a specific brand, model trombone, and the quotes have to look exactly the same. And typically, if they're exactly the same, it's the lowest bid, right? Unless some sort of justification is done. So teachers don't always, they have their wish list, but they haven't went the extra mile. I would say in this case, it's really important to go the extra mile and already have the 3 quotes so that it makes it that much faster for the school division to say, oh, you've already got that? All right, let's go. We can get it tomorrow, right? So I think that's the extra step that teachers are going to need to go in this route. Also, some districts have master agreements or contracts with particular music vendors, so that can also help teachers. And if you know how to navigate some of that with them, I mean, obviously, I really do like to buy local when I can. I think that's really important to funding our industry, because I do think it's really important that our interplay, right, between music businesses and with school divisions, right? Like I have strong relationships with my local vendors, but we also know that like there's vendors all over the country, right? That are really awesome. So just helping them navigate and knowing where the threshold is, that sort of thing, or if master agreements or contracts already exist that can help them, that's important as well. A couple other key things I think are important but should be very downplayed and clear at this point is lining up rationales with the school district strategic plans, right? Giving some justification as to why instruments are needed. So making that case for student needs, like you could aligned to NAFME has opportunity to learn standards or music standards, the core arts standards. So you could put some justifications in. You could, have teachers talk about the number of students that are in their current program, but then talk about projected enrollments or cyclical replacement. So these are all really important things. But I also think that when time is of the essence, it's not necessary to, maybe 3 years ago, we could build these really beautiful, like persuasive arguments. But now I think it is really about spending the money with also alignment to the LEA application. And just a shorter justification, I think would probably be appropriate in this sort of time frame.
Yeah, and I think the key word you used, and I encourage all the dealers here to use as well with your educators, is addendum. That's really the key word. We're looking to make an addendum to the ESSER plan to access the funding. And just to try to make it kind of you've unpacked just so much for us here. How do we activate those road reps and folks that are working with the educators? It's get your plan together. It's explain that you can do an addendum to get to this funding, and then it's getting to those stakeholders with that plan. So in regards to how, similar to what we saw in Prop 28 as well, to get the information as to how much funding is left in the districts, what resources are out there that are, I guess, more viable than others to try to at least get to some of that?
Yeah, it's so tricky. Kristen put in the chat, she put the Edunomics Lab. That's the one I feel like we've been sharing for a couple years. But I don't know, sometimes when I had looked at it in my previous school division, it wasn't as up to date as I thought it would be. Virginia has one that seems a little more up to date because it's closer maybe to where the data is coming in. Honestly, the other thing I was thinking about this, Mike, when we were prepping earlier, School districts may keep internals. I wouldn't go so far as to FOIA it at the moment, because I feel like FOIA is just not the right course to go. But besides the dashboard that Kristen shared, or Googling or searching for a state dashboard, there aren't that many avenues or just like ways to know. I almost think of it more as a kind of keeping your ear to the ground, or even calling up the financial. I mean, some teachers wouldn't feel comfortable doing that, but maybe dealers and vendors would, right? Like, hey, we'd like to know how much you have left, because we've got some things that you can spend it on. So it is tricky, I will say that.
Yeah, I think one thing I've noticed across the country is to encourage educators to ask a follow-up question, because many times, as I've coached some educators, they say, well, they said it was all spent. And I had them go back to the well and say, well, where did you spend it? And then they would uncover, oh, wait, there's still $10 million that went unspent. But a lot of folks, the first answer they have is, we had our plan, it's all taken care of. It's like, well, if it's not taken care of, there's still funding there. So you have to kind of uncover a few rocks to get to the funding that's still hanging out there. So
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that when people say that, what they're saying is, we've developed a plan that says these things, but they have not spent the money. I mean, I can tell you from personal experience. And I think schools, I think they have spent a decent amount of the money. I'm not saying that they haven't. I think what I'm really just trying to iterate is that there's definitely still money out there.
Well, Dr. Bollino, thank you so much for being a panelist with us today on ESSER funding. You're a wealth of knowledge and resource in regards to this topic, and appreciate your time. Would like to bring Scott Burgener up with me, the Music Education Department Specialist with Mesa Public Schools. Scott's been at Mesa for quite a few years. Mesa Public Schools program has been recognized as a best community for music education, which many of us are familiar with. That NAM has done that program for many years, the NAM Foundation, and that's been for the past 6 years, Scott. So congratulations on that success in Mesa. That's wonderful. And as I understand it, you've had some success with ESSER funding. So we've gone through kind of the process and the pieces now to unlock it. And in your experience with Mesa Public Schools, could you share some successes that you've experienced in the past 3 years with your funding, and how that's worked out for you?
Sure, I'd be happy to. We've had a lot of success getting ESSER funds for music education in Mesa. And I think a lot of that came to be because our district went to our parents and actually asked them what things would help regain learning loss and help them financially, and what would they see as a priority. And by and large, one of the big priorities that was mentioned in our district was music and arts education, and supporting those programs, because so much time and learning was lost over the pandemic, and not being able to be in person, and everything from trying to start beginners on a computer, trying to teach them how to play a trumpet, trying to tune a violin through a drive. We actually had a drive-by tuning system set up in our district to try and keep fourth graders going on their string instruments. But ESSER really helped us in 3 main ways. The first, with the first year of ESSER funding, we were able to provide summer instruction in music when the kids came back to school. So it actually, for 2 years, paid for our district's summer music camp. And there was no limit on the number of kids that we can enroll in it. We had probably close to 300 participating in it each year. And that really allowed us to get the kids caught up a little bit and get them back up to where they were prior to the pandemic. In the first year also, we were able to add 4th grade band instruction into our district. And we had, for many years, had only started band in the 5th grade. Years ago, it started in the 4th grade, but that went away during one of the past economic hardship times that we went through. But we were able to bring back 4th grade band. And so we added 8 additional teachers into our mix to be able to provide band instruction to those 4th grade students. And then the biggest boon for us was new instruments. And we were able to get $3 million worth of new instruments over the 3 years. We were able to spend 1 million each year. And that was a combination of band and orchestra. And we really, that helped us so much, not only because of the learning lost, but we had many schools where kids were sharing instruments. And obviously, you know, the pandemic brought to our attention how unsafe that really is. And we were able to provide more instruments now for our students. Several families had dealt with lost jobs and lower incomes coming in, so they weren't able to rent or purchase their own instruments anymore like they were able to prior to the pandemic. So really, I think that having those instruments has been the biggest success for us throughout this entire ESSER process.
That's amazing, Scott. Who was did you have kind of a partner at the administration level that you worked with hand in hand with this? I'm just curious about who your kind of primary stakeholder was that you had to work with.
Right. Actually, there were 3 people.
Okay.
We have assistant superintendent of teaching and learning. She oversees our department along with the other content areas in the district. So a lot of the support came from her office. And, you know, in other districts, that might be like a director of curriculum and instruction, or, you know, somebody that oversees the various content disciplines in each district. She was a big supporter. And then our superintendent was really big on supporting the arts and allowing us to have this funding and helping write it up. Now, one person who I wasn't familiar with that I became familiar with through this process was our district federal and state grants person. We happen to be the largest district in our state, so we do have a person that specifically works with federal and state grants. And I had not done a lot with that person before. Some stuff with Title 4A in the past, and you know, I've gone to her with some questions for Title I, but she really oversaw this whole ESSER process and getting all of the spreadsheets made with all the instruments we were ordering, and helping us through the purchasing process and getting all of the equipment ordered that we wanted to get. So she was huge. So I would encourage anyone, and that's probably the best advice I can give is let the teachers know that they need to find out who's in charge of the federal and state grants in their district. And, you know, that might be the superintendent if it's a smaller district, but there may be a specific person in charge of that in some of the larger ones. And then it didn't hurt that we had a school board member who happened to be our school board president, who is a huge arts advocate. And she has been on our side from day one of getting on the school board. And she really spoke to our credit to help support these initiatives through ESSER. And you know, I can't thank her enough for you know what she did to help us in this process.
That's amazing, Scott. You know, one of the things I look at across the country, I think there's only 1,600, I think, about, you know, fine arts administrators are in that role across the country, you know, and we have some folks on here from the Midwest where it's more, they have department chairs, and the leadership is not necessarily, you know, an admin level, but department chairs and so forth. So I think wherever you're at in the country, you have to find out, you know, where's that leadership and where does that lead to and so forth. And that's very helpful to hear that context from you. But congratulations on all you're doing with Mesa Public Schools and sharing that wonderful story of how you access that for all those kids. So thank you so much for joining us today. Any last words of wisdom for all our great AIM dealers here with us today?
Yeah, the earlier you can get these requests in, the better. Because, you know, and I think it's a little easier now than it was the first year of ESSER, because we were dealing with some supply chain issues and things like that at the very beginning. And we put in these very large orders all at the same time, and it was hard for the manufacturers to keep up with it and get all the instruments that we ordered in time. So because of the deadlines, our district is actually cutting off our ESSER spending now. And just to make sure that all the ducks are in a row and that all the paperwork has been completed and all that stuff. So I would just encourage music teachers, if they haven't received any ESSER help yet, to, get on top of it right away, because the bigger districts especially may be cutting off things sooner than September because of all the paperwork that's involved and all of the stuff that they need to do behind the scenes to ensure that that funding is has been taken care of legally and in the right way and all of that stuff. So I would say just say get on top of it quick.
Yeah, otherwise all that paperwork and everything can't be done in the last week before
Right.
September 30th. So it makes
Yeah.
a ton of sense. Well, thank you so much, Scott, for your time today. Appreciate all you do in Mesa Public Schools, and enjoy that warm weather down there.